There are two explanations for why you exist. Only two. Everything else is detail. Everything else is footnote. Every philosophy, every religion, every scientific theory, every creation myth, every cosmological model reduces to one of these two explanations. Either something conscious created reality on purpose, or something unconscious created reality by accident. Either mind came first and matter followed, or matter came first and mind emerged. Either God or quantum mechanics. There is no third option. This is not oversimplification. This is the actual structure of the question. Strip away the complexity, and this is what remains. Two possibilities, two stories, two explanations for everything. And for most of human history, these two explanations lived in separate worlds. Science investigated the how, religion asserted the who. Science measured mechanisms, religion proclaimed purpose. They rarely overlapped, rarely competed, rarely even spoke to each other. The scientist went to the laboratory, the theologian went to the temple, and neither bothered the other. Then, quantum mechanics happened, and everything changed. Because quantum mechanics investigating the how at the most fundamental level started discovering things that sound exactly like the who, started finding structures in the equations that theology had described in scripture, started uncovering mechanisms in the mathematics that religion had called the actions of God. The two explanations that had lived in separate worlds suddenly found themselves in the same room, looking at the same data, reaching the same conclusions in different languages. And the most remarkable discovery of the last century is that these two explanations are converging, not competing, not contradicting, converging. The deeper physics goes into the foundations of reality, the more it discovers structures that theology described thousands of years ago. The more it finds mechanisms that religion called miracles. The more it uncovers truths that scripture asserted without proof and that quantum mechanics now confirms with equations. This convergence is either the most profound discovery in the history of human thought or the most dangerous illusion. Because if the convergence is real, then the war between science and religion has been a misunderstanding, a family quarrel between siblings who did not realize they were describing the same thing in different languages. 400 years of conflict between faith and reason. 400 years of scientists dismissing God and theologians dismissing science. 400 years of the greatest minds on both sides talking past each other, and the whole time they were looking at the same thing, describing the same reality, drawing the same map with different symbols. But if the convergence is illusion, then we are doing what humans always do, finding patterns where none exist. Seeing God in the equations because seeing God is what brains evolved to do, projecting meaning onto meaningless mathematics, mistaking coincidence for design. Either way, the convergence demands investigation, demands rigorous, honest, fearless investigation, because the stakes are absolute. We are asking whether reality has a creator, whether existence has purpose, whether consciousness has meaning beyond chemistry, whether your life is intended or accidental, whether the universe knew you were coming, or whether you are cosmic noise, God or quantum, purpose or accident, mind or matter, the question behind every question you have ever asked. Let us begin with what quantum mechanics actually says, not what popular science says it says, not what New Age gurus claim it means, not what internet philosophers have distorted it into, not what clickbait headlines have twisted it into, what it actually says. In the mathematics, in the experiments, in the peer-reviewed, confirmed, replicated, rigorously established physics that has been tested more thoroughly than any scientific theory ever devised. Quantum mechanics says reality is not what you think it is, not close to what you think it is, not approximately different from what you think it is, fundamentally, radically, completely different. At the most fundamental level, matter does not behave like matter. Particles do not behave like particles. Objects do not have definite properties until they are measured. An electron does not have a position until you look for its position, does not have a momentum until you measure its momentum, does not have a spin until you check its spin. Before measurement, the electron exists in superposition, a quantum state that contains all possible positions, all possible momenta, all possible spins simultaneously. Not one position that you happen not to know. All positions, genuinely, simultaneously. The electron is not somewhere, and you do not know where. The electron is everywhere, and nowhere until observation forces it to choose. This is not interpretation. This is experimental fact. The double slit experiment demonstrates it with brutal clarity. Fire electrons one at a time at a barrier with two slits. Each electron passes through the barrier and hits a detector screen behind it. If electrons were ordinary particles, each one would go through one slit or the other. You would see two bands on the detector screen, one behind each slit. This is not what happens. Instead, you see an interference pattern, alternating bands of high and low intensity, the pattern that waves produce when they pass through two slits and interfere with each other. Each single electron fired alone, one at a time, produces this wave pattern, as if each electron passes through both slits simultaneously, interferes with itself, and lands on the screen according to the interference pattern. But if you place a detector at the slits to determine which slit the electron passes through, the interference pattern vanishes. You see two bands. The electron behaves like a particle, goes through one slit or the other, not both. The act of observation changes the behavior. The act of looking determines what happens. Observation does not reveal a pre-existing reality. Observation creates reality. The electron has no definite path until you observe its path, has no definite slit until you check which slit it used. The measurement creates the fact. Before measurement, there is no fact. Only quantum superposition, only possibility, only potential, waiting to become actual. Stop and think about what this means. Really think. The most fundamental building blocks of reality, the particles that make up everything you see and touch and are, do not have definite properties until they are observed. Your body is made of atoms. Atoms are made of particles, and those particles are not definitely anywhere until something observes them. You are made of uncertainty, constructed from possibility, built from the indeterminate. The solid table you touch, the concrete floor you stand on, the physical body you inhabit, all of it at the most fundamental level is quantum superposition that has been collapsed into definiteness by observation. Remove observation and the definiteness dissolves. The table becomes probability. The floor becomes wave function. Your body becomes superposition. Not metaphorically, mathematically. This is what the equations say. This is what the experiments confirm. Reality depends on observation, and observation might depend on consciousness. This is the measurement problem, the deepest problem in physics. What constitutes a measurement? What triggers the transition from possibility to actuality? From superposition to definite outcome? From quantum to classical? The equations do not say. The Schrodinger equation describes how the wave function evolves over time. It does not describe how the wave function collapses. Collapse is not in the equation. Collapse is added by hand, by physicists who observe it happening but cannot explain why. The most successful theory in physics has a gap at its center, a mystery at its foundation, a question it cannot answer. What causes collapse? What makes reality definite? What turns possibility into actuality? Some interpretations say consciousness causes collapse, that the mind of the observer is what forces reality to choose, that without a conscious observer, reality remains indefinite, unresolved, a ghost of possibilities. This is the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, and it places consciousness at the foundation of physics, not as product of physics, as prerequisite, not as emergent property of complex matter, as the thing that makes matter definite. That gives reality its substance. That converts the potential of the wave function into the actuality of the physical world. If this interpretation is correct, then mind precedes matter. Consciousness creates physical reality. The observer is more fundamental than the observed. And this is exactly what theology has always claimed. God, the conscious creator, precedes physical reality, creates physical reality, sustains physical reality through continuous conscious act. The theological claim and the quantum mechanical interpretation are structurally identical. Consciousness first, reality second. Mind before matter, creator before creation. Now consider what theology says, not what bad theology says, not the caricature of theology that atheist polemicists attack, not the straw man version where God is old man in the sky who gets angry and floods things. The serious, sophisticated theological tradition that has been refined over thousands of years by the greatest minds in human history. Aquinas, Maimonides, Al-Ghazali, Nagarjuna, Shankara, Augustine, Ibn Arabi. The core theological claim common to virtually all theistic traditions. There exists a conscious being who created reality. This being is not part of reality, not subject to the laws of physics, not made of matter, not located in space, not bounded by time. This being is the ground of reality, the source, the foundation. Without this being, nothing would exist. With this being, everything exists. Creation is conscious act, reality is intentional, existence is chosen, matter is secondary to mind. The physical universe is expression of consciousness, not generator of consciousness. This is the theistic claim. Simple, bold, untestable by conventional science, unfalsifiable by experiment. And for centuries, scientists have dismissed it precisely because it is untestable. Science deals in testable claims, falsifiable hypotheses, measurable predictions. God is none of these. God cannot be put in a laboratory, cannot be measured with instruments, cannot be falsified by experiment. Therefore, God is outside science, outside the domain of physics, outside the conversation. But quantum mechanics is inside the conversation, is the most tested, most confirmed, most precise theory in the history of science. Predictions confirmed to 12 decimal places, more accurate than any measurement of any quantity in any field of human knowledge. This is not fringe science, not speculation, not hypothesis. This is the hardest established fact in all of physics. And quantum mechanics has discovered things that sound like theology, has found structures that echo scripture, has uncovered mechanisms that parallel divine creation. Not because physicists went looking for God, they did not. Most physicists are not religious. Many are actively atheist. They went looking for the behavior of subatomic particles. And what they found at the foundation of the subatomic world was not what they expected. Not the clockwork mechanism of classical physics, not the deterministic billiard table of Newton, not the predictable, controllable, orderly universe that materialist philosophy had promised. Instead, they found uncertainty, found superposition, found entanglement, found non-locality, found observer-dependent reality, found creation from nothing, found a universe that behaves as if consciousness matters, as if observation is fundamental, as if mind is primary, as if someone or something designed the rules to produce exactly this result. Let us go through the parallels, one by one, precisely, without exaggeration, without wishful thinking, without forcing the comparison. Just looking at what quantum mechanics says and what theology says and noting where they align. And these are not obscure features of either system. These are the central claims, the core doctrines. The most important things theology says about God, and the most important things quantum mechanics says about reality. If the alignment were between minor details, it could be dismissed. It is not between minor details. It is between the foundations. Parallel 1. Creation from nothing. Theology says God creates the universe from nothing. Creatio ex nihilo. The fundamental doctrine of Abrahamic religion. God speaks and reality appears from nothing. Not from pre-existing material, from absolute void. Quantum mechanics says the vacuum creates particles from nothing. Virtual particles appear from empty space. Zero-point energy fills the void. The Casimir effect demonstrates measurable force from vacuum fluctuations. The universe itself may have emerged from a quantum vacuum fluctuation. Nothing creates something, continuously, measurably. The mechanism is different. Theology says divine command, physics says uncertainty principle, but the phenomenon is identical. Creation from nothing, something appearing where nothing was. Reality emerging from void. And in both cases, the creation is continuous. Theology says God sustains creation moment by moment. Physics says the vacuum fluctuates moment by moment. Neither is past event. Both a present process. Creation from nothing happening now. Always. Everywhere. Parallel 2. Omnipresence. Theology says God is everywhere. Omnipresent. Not located in any particular place. Not absent from any place. Present at every point in space simultaneously. Quantum fields are everywhere. The electromagnetic field fills all space. The Higgs field fills all space. The electron field fills all space. Every quantum field exists at every point in the universe simultaneously. Fields do not have location. They are not here or there. They are everywhere. And the vacuum state, the ground state of all these fields is the same everywhere. Uniform, universal, omnipresent. The creative nothing that generates all particles is present at every point in space. Just as theology says of God. Parallel 3. Sustaining reality. Theology says God does not just create once and withdraw. God sustains, holds reality in existence moment by moment. If God withdrew sustaining power, everything would cease to exist. Not decay, cease, instantly, completely. Quantum fields sustain particles moment by moment. An electron exists because the electron field is excited at that point. If the field excitation ceased, the electron would vanish. Not decay, vanish. Particles are not independent objects sitting in space. They are excitations of fields, disturbances in underlying reality. And the underlying reality, the field, must persist for the particle to persist. Remove the field and the particle is gone, not destroyed, never independently real, always dependent on the sustaining field. This is identical to the theological concept of contingent existence sustained by necessary ground. Parallel 4. Non-locality. Theology says God is not limited by space. God's actions are not constrained by distance. God can affect anything anywhere instantly. Not because God travels fast, because God is not in space. God transcends space. Quantum entanglement demonstrates non-locality. Two entangled particles separated by any distance are correlated instantaneously. Measuring one instantly determines the state of the other, not because information travels between them, because they are not truly separate. They are aspects of a single quantum state that transcends the spatial separation between them. The correlation is non-local, not limited by distance, not limited by the speed of light, not limited by space, as if the entangled state exists outside space, transcends space. Just as theology says of God. Parallel 5. The word creates. Theology says God creates through speech, through logos, through the word. In the beginning was the word. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Creation through information, through structured command, through meaningful pattern that produces physical reality. quantum mechanics is fundamentally informational. The wave function is information about possible outcomes. Measurement extracts information from quantum systems. Quantum information theory suggests that information might be more fundamental than matter or energy. The holographic principle says the information content of any region of space is encoded on its boundary. John Wheeler coined the phrase, "it from bit." Everything from information, reality from data, the physical world from informational substrate, logos producing cosmos, the word creating the world. Physics arriving at the same conclusion theology started from. Parallel 6. The observer is special. Theology says God as conscious being has unique relationship to creation. Consciousness is not just another property of matter, it is the property that matters. The thing that gives creation meaning, the purpose of creation, the reason anything exists. Quantum mechanics gives the observer a unique role. The observer collapses the wave function, determines which outcome becomes real. Without observers, reality remains in superposition, indefinite, unrealized. The observer is not passive witness to pre-existing reality. The observer is participant in creating reality. Consciousness has special status in quantum mechanics, not as emergent property of complex matter, as the thing that makes matter definite, that gives reality its actuality. 6 parallels, not vague similarities, precise structural correspondences, creation from nothing, omnipresence, sustaining reality, non-locality, information as foundation, special role of consciousness. But there are more. Parallel 7, hidden reality. Theology says God is hidden, Deus absconditus, the hidden God. God does not appear directly, does not manifest in obvious, observable, testable ways. God hides behind creation, is present in everything but visible in nothing. Quantum mechanics describes a hidden reality. The wave function is not directly observable. You cannot see a superposition, cannot watch an electron being in 2 places at once. The moment you look, the superposition collapses. The underlying quantum reality hides from observation, is real but inaccessible, present but invisible. The most fundamental level of reality, the level described by the wave function, can never be directly perceived. Only its effects can be measured. Only its consequences can be observed. The thing itself remains hidden, just as theology says of God. Parallel 8. Unity beneath diversity. Theology says all of creation, despite its apparent diversity, is unified in God. One God, creating and sustaining everything. The diversity of the world is surface appearance. Beneath the surface, all things are connected in their common dependence on the Creator. Quantum field theory says all particles, despite their apparent diversity, are excitations of underlying fields. An electron here and an electron there are not 2 separate things. They are 2 excitations of the same electron field, like 2 waves on the same ocean. The diversity of particles is surface appearance. Beneath the surface, everything is unified in the quantum fields. One field manifesting as many particles, one reality appearing as many things. Unity beneath diversity. Theology and physics agreeing on the structure. Parallel 9. The beginning. Theology says creation has a beginning. In the beginning, God created. Before the beginning, nothing. Not empty space, not vacuum, nothing. No time, no space. No matter, no laws. And then creation. The Big Bang Theory says the universe has a beginning, 13.8 billion years ago, before which there was no time, no space, no matter, no laws as we know them. Everything began simultaneously. Space-time, matter, energy, all emerging together from an initial singularity that physics cannot describe with current theory. The first moment is beyond physics. inaccessible to equations, the boundary where science ends. And beyond that boundary, theology has always claimed God acts in the beginning, before the beginning, at the point where physics stops and something else starts. Parallel 10. Fine-tuning. Theology says God designed creation with intention, calibrated the parameters, chose the constants, set the conditions precisely right for life, for consciousness, for beings who could know their creator. The anthropic fine-tuning of the universe is measured fact, not theory, not speculation, measured. The cosmological constant tuned to 123 decimal places, the strong force coupling constant within the narrow window that permits stable nuclei, the electromagnetic force precisely calibrated for chemistry, the ratio of proton to electron mass exactly right for molecular bonding, the mass of the Higgs boson in the narrow range that allows atoms to form, the ratio of dark energy to dark matter in the slim range that allows galaxies to form. Change any constant by fractions of a percent and the universe is sterile. No stars, no planets, no chemistry, no life, no consciousness, no one to ask why. The probability of this configuration by chance is effectively zero. Not small, not unlikely, effectively zero. Either there are unimaginably many universes and we occupy the one that permits observers, or the parameters were chosen, set deliberately, calibrated with intention, by something that wanted observers to exist. Something that wanted consciousness, something that wanted beings who could look at the equations and recognize the fine-tuning and ask whether it was designed. 10 parallels, 10 precise structural correspondences between what theology claims about God and what quantum mechanics discovers about reality. This is not cherry-picking. These are not obscure features of either system. These are the central claims of theology and the central discoveries of quantum mechanics, and they align with disturbing precision. Theology asserts these as properties of God. Quantum mechanics discovers these as properties of the physical world. The correspondence is either extraordinary coincidence or evidence that theology and physics are describing the same underlying reality in different vocabularies. But there are also differences, profound differences, and intellectual honesty requires examining them with the same rigor. Difference 1. Consciousness. God is conscious. The quantum vacuum is not. God has intention. The wave function has mathematics. God chooses to create. The vacuum fluctuates because the uncertainty principle requires it. This is not minor difference. This is the difference between purpose and mechanism, between design and accident, between a universe that means something and a universe that just happens. The parallels are structural. The differences are existential. A universe created by conscious God is a universe with meaning embedded in its structure. A universe created by unconscious quantum fields is a universe where meaning is generated only by the minds the fields accidentally produce. In the first case, meaning is fundamental. In the second case, meaning is emergent. In the first case, you matter because the Creator intended you. In the second case, you matter only because your brain generates the experience of mattering. The parallel is structural. The difference is everything. Difference 2. Personality. God, in most theological traditions, is personal, has relationship with creation, speaks, loves, commands, judges, cares, responds to prayer, reveals through scripture, enters into covenant, forgives, punishes, grieves, celebrates. God is not abstract principle. God is person, the most important person, the person whose relationship with you defines your existence. Quantum fields do none of these things. Quantum fields are mathematical structures, abstract entities described by equations. They do not speak, do not love, do not command, do not care. They do not know you exist. If the quantum vacuum is God, then God is impersonal, mathematical, indifferent. This is not the God of Abraham who called a man out of Ur, not the God of Jesus who wept at the tomb of Lazarus, not the God of Muhammad who says, "I am closer to you than your jugular vein." This is the God of Spinoza at best, the God who is identical with nature, Deus sive natura, God or nature, same thing. And for many theologians, this is not God at all. This is atheism wearing the mask of divinity. This is the universe calling itself God to avoid calling itself accident. Difference 3. Testability. God is not testable, not measurable, not falsifiable. This is either God's defining feature, transcendence beyond the physical, or God's fatal flaw, existence that cannot be distinguished from non-existence, depending on your philosophical commitments. Quantum mechanics is the most testable theory in history. Every prediction can be checked, every claim can be verified, 12 decimal places of precision. The anomalous magnetic moment of the electron predicted and measured to 1 part in a trillion. The Lamb shift, the Casimir force, the photoelectric effect, Bell test experiments, every prediction confirmed, every measurement matching. If quantum mechanics is wrong, it can be shown to be wrong. That is its strength. If God is wrong, God cannot be shown to be wrong. That is either God's mystery or God's meaninglessness. This asymmetry matters. It means the parallels between quantum mechanics and theology are not parallels between equals. They are parallels between proven physics and unproven belief, between measured fact and asserted faith. The structural similarities do not make theology scientific. They do not make quantum mechanics religious. They sit in an uncomfortable space between, a space where honest thinkers must dwell without resolution, without the comfort of certainty in either direction. Difference 4. Moral dimension. God in every major theological tradition has moral nature, is good, commands good, defines good. The universe created by God has moral structure. Right and wrong are not human inventions. They are features of reality built in by the Creator. There is cosmic justice, there is judgment, there are consequences that extend beyond death. Quantum mechanics has no moral dimension whatsoever. The wave function does not distinguish between good and evil. Particles do not care about justice. Fields do not reward virtue. The universe described by quantum mechanics is morally neutral, indifferent. Whatever happens, happens because the equations produce it, not because it is good or right or just. If quantum mechanics is all there is, then morality is human construction. Useful, perhaps, evolutionarily advantageous, perhaps, but not written into the fabric of reality, not fundamental, not cosmic, just our invention, just our story, and stories can be rewritten. These differences are real. Ignoring them would be dishonest. Overstating them would also be dishonest, because the parallels are also real. 10 precise structural correspondences between what theology claims and what physics discovers. And the question of whether the parallels or the differences are more significant depends on something physics cannot determine. It depends on whether you think consciousness is fundamental or emergent, whether mind creates matter or matter creates mind, whether the observer in quantum mechanics is truly special or just another physical system, whether the fine-tuning of the universe is evidence of design or artifact of selection bias, whether the convergence of physics and theology is discovery or projection, whether you look at the 10 parallels and see God or look at the 4 differences and see accident. Quantum mechanics does not answer these questions, but it makes them sharper than any previous theory, makes them more precise, more urgent, more unavoidable. Because before quantum mechanics you could dismiss the parallels as vague poetic coincidence. Before quantum mechanics, theology and physics occupied separate domains, separate languages, separate questions. Now they occupy the same territory, ask the same questions, find the same structures, and disagree only about what those structures mean, whether they are mechanism or design, whether they are accident or intention, whether they are God or quantum. And here is the disturbing possibility that neither side wants to consider. Perhaps God and quantum mechanics are not alternatives. Perhaps they are not competing explanations. Perhaps they are the same thing seen from different angles. Perhaps God chose quantum mechanics as the language of creation. Perhaps the wave function is God's creative act expressed mathematically. Perhaps the vacuum fluctuations are God's sustaining power described in equations. Perhaps the non-locality of entanglement is God's omnipresence, measured in laboratories. Perhaps the observer-dependent nature of quantum reality is God's relationship with consciousness formalized in physics. Perhaps the parallels are not coincidence and not projection, but recognition. Recognition that theology intuited what physics would later measure. That scripture described what equations would later confirm. That faith and evidence point in the same direction, not because one copies the other, but because both describe reality, and reality is one thing, not two. Or perhaps the parallels are cognitive illusion, and the differences are the real story. Perhaps the human mind, seeing God in the equations, is doing exactly what the human mind does when it sees a face in the clouds, or a message in random noise, or a conspiracy in coincidence. Perhaps the universe is mechanical and impersonal and unconscious, and the fact that its mechanisms happen to resemble theological descriptions of God is just that, happening to resemble. Pattern without meaning, coincidence without significance. And the four differences, consciousness, personality, testability, morality, are the real indicators of the truth. That quantum mechanics is mechanism, not design. That the universe creates without knowing it creates. That reality has no creator, and the resemblance to creation is the cruelest joke the universe has ever told. We do not know, and that is the point. That is where the power of this question lives. In the not knowing, in the space between proof and faith, in the gap between what the equations say and what they mean, God or quantum. The question lives in that gap, and the gap might be where everything important happens. This is not proof, this is possibility. And possibility in the space between God and quantum mechanics is the most charged possibility in the history of human thought. Because if it is true, then the war between science and religion was never real, was misunderstanding, was failure to recognize that the laboratory and the temple were studying the same thing with different instruments. The physicist with equations, the mystic with prayer, the philosopher with logic, the poet with metaphor, all approaching the same incomprehensible reality from different angles, all seeing different faces of the same truth, all correct, all incomplete, all necessary. This is where we go next, deeper into each parallel, into the mathematics behind the correspondence, into the experiments that force the comparison, into the philosophical implications that neither physics nor theology can escape, into the question that defines everything. Is the universe conscious or mechanical? Is reality designed or accidental? Is there a God who chose quantum mechanics as the language of creation? Or is there quantum mechanics and no God? And the resemblance to theology is the most extraordinary coincidence in the history of thought. The answer changes everything. About physics, about theology, about you, about what your consciousness is, about what your existence means, about whether the universe cares that you exist or is indifferent to your existence, about whether your life has purpose written into the equations or purpose. You must create yourself from the void, God or quantum. The question has never been more precisely asked, and the answer has never been more consequential. We have identified 10 parallels between God and quantum mechanics, 10 structural correspondences between the oldest claims of theology and the newest discoveries of physics. Now we go deeper into the experiments, into the mathematics, into the laboratories where these parallels are not discussed but demonstrated, where they are not argued but measured, where the resemblance between divine creation and quantum mechanics becomes not philosophical speculation but experimental fact. Because when you look closely at what quantum mechanics actually does in laboratories, the resemblance to divine action becomes not weaker, but stronger, not vaguer, but more precise, not easier to dismiss, but harder, much harder. The three deepest parallels are creation from nothing, the observer, problem, and entanglement. These are not just the most interesting parallels, they are the most experimentally confirmed, the most mathematically rigorous, the most philosophically consequential, and the most disturbing, because each one individually would be remarkable. Together they form a pattern that is either the fingerprint of God or the most elaborate coincidence in the history of the universe. Start with creation from nothing. This is not metaphor. This is not loose analogy. This is physics. The quantum vacuum, the lowest energy state of the quantum fields, is not empty, is not void, is not nothing in any meaningful sense. It seethes with activity. Virtual particles appear and disappear at rates beyond human comprehension. Electron-positron pairs materialize from empty space, exist for unimaginably brief moments, and annihilate back into nothing. Every cubic centimeter of empty space contains this activity. Right now, where you are sitting, in the air around you, in the space between your atoms, creation from nothing is happening, continuously, everywhere, at every moment. And this is not theoretical prediction waiting for confirmation. It has been confirmed. The Casimir effect, predicted by Hendrik Casimir in 1948 and measured with increasing precision, ever since demonstrates measurable physical force arising from vacuum fluctuations. Place two uncharged metal plates very close together in vacuum. The plates experience a force pushing them together, not electrostatic, not gravitational, not magnetic, a force arising from the vacuum itself, from the virtual particles that exist between and around the plates. The geometry of the plates restricts which virtual particles can appear between them. Fewer virtual particles between the plates than outside them. The imbalance creates force, measurable force, calculated force, force that matches the theoretical prediction to extraordinary precision. The vacuum creates, the nothing produces. The void generates measurable physical consequences. This is not interpretation. This is measurement. The precision is staggering. The Casimir effect has been confirmed to better than 1% accuracy. The Lamb shift, the tiny energy difference between two hydrogen energy levels caused by vacuum fluctuations, has been measured and matches quantum electrodynamic predictions to 12 decimal places. 12. 1 part in a trillion. The anomalous magnetic moment of the electron, predicted by calculating the effects of virtual particles interacting with the electron, has been confirmed to the same extraordinary precision. The vacuum is not approximately active. It is precisely active, measurably active, calculably active. Its creative power is the most precisely confirmed fact in all of physics. And the vacuum does not just create particles. The vacuum may have created the universe. Cosmic inflation, the theory that the universe expanded exponentially in the first fraction of a second after the Big Bang, is driven by vacuum energy. The quantum fluctuations in the inflating vacuum became the seeds of all large-scale structure in the universe. Every galaxy, every cluster of galaxies, every cosmic web of matter that stretches across billions of light years began as a quantum fluctuation in the vacuum. The cosmic microwave background radiation carries the imprint of these primordial vacuum fluctuations. We can see them, mapped by the Planck satellite with exquisite precision, the fingerprints of creation from nothing imprinted on the oldest light in the universe. The cosmological constant, the energy density of empty space, is measured to be approximately 10 to the minus 123 inches, natural units. This is the most precisely fine-tuned number in all of physics. If it were larger, matter would be blown apart before galaxies could form. If it were smaller, the universe would have collapsed back on itself before stars could ignite. The vacuum energy that creates from nothing is calibrated to 123 decimal places to allow the creation to be complex enough to produce minds, complex enough to produce consciousness, complex enough to produce beings who can measure the vacuum energy and marvel at its precision. Now hear what theology says. God creates from nothing, creatio ex nihilo, not from pre-existing material, from absolute void. And God's creation is not past event. It is continuous. Present tense. Ongoing. Aquinas, the greatest philosopher of the medieval world, described it as creatio continua. Continuous creation. God sustains reality at every moment. If God ceased, sustaining reality would cease. Not gradually, instantly, completely. Every moment of existence is fresh act of divine creation. You are not created once and then left to exist on your own. You are created now, and now, and now. Each moment, a new act of divine will, bringing you into being from nothing. Al-Ghazali, the great Islamic philosopher, made the same argument 8 centuries ago. He described the universe as entirely dependent on God's continuous creative act. Each moment, God creates the world anew. The connection between one moment and the next is not causal necessity. It is divine habit. God customarily creates moment B after moment A, but there is no physical law compelling this sequence, only divine will. Remove divine will and the sequence breaks. The next moment does not follow from this moment by any physical mechanism. It follows from God's decision to create it. Every moment, every instant, creation from nothing happening now. The Hindu tradition expressed this through the concept of Vishnu's dream. The universe exists because Vishnu dreams it. The moment Vishnu stops dreaming, the universe ceases, not ends, ceases. Was never independently real, was always dependent on the sustaining consciousness, always expression of awareness, always dream of the divine mind. The solid physical universe that seems so substantial, so independent, so self-existing is dream, is sustained by consciousness, is creation from nothing at every moment. 3 traditions, 3 continents, 3 millennia, the same insight. The universe is not self-sustaining. The universe is continuously created. The universe depends at every moment on something that creates from nothing. Physics discovers the same structure in the quantum vacuum. The parallel is not vague. It is precise. Continuous creation from nothing. Physics measures it. Theology asserts it. Both describe the same phenomenon. The same structure, the same ongoing emergence of something from nothing at every point in space, at every moment in time. The mechanism differs. Physics says uncertainty principle. Theology says divine will. But the phenomenon is identical, and the phenomenon is confirmed. Whatever causes it, whatever drives it, whatever the mechanism, the creation, from nothing is real, is measured, is the most precisely confirmed fact in physics. The question is not whether creation from nothing happens. The question is what creation from nothing means. Whether it means God, or whether it means quantum fluctuation. Whether the mechanism is the explanation, or whether the mechanism requires an explanation. Whether the uncertainty principle is the final answer, or whether the uncertainty principle itself needs a creator. Now the observer. This is where the parallels become most unsettling, because the observer problem in quantum mechanics is not just academic puzzle. It is the crack in the foundation of physics through which theology pours like light through a fracture. In 1935, Erwin Schrodinger proposed his famous thought experiment. A cat is placed in a sealed box with a radioactive atom, a Geiger counter, a hammer, and a vial of poison. If the atom decays, the counter triggers the hammer breaks the vial, and the cat dies. If the atom does not decay, the cat lives. Quantum mechanics says the atom is in superposition of decayed and not decayed until measured. Therefore, the cat is in superposition of alive and dead until someone opens the box. The cat is both alive and dead simultaneously. Not alive or dead, and we do not know which. Both. Genuinely. Simultaneously. This sounds absurd. Schrodinger intended it to sound absurd. He proposed the thought experiment not to illustrate quantum mechanics, but to ridicule it. To show that the theory leads to conclusions so bizarre that something must be wrong. Cats cannot be both alive and dead. That is not how reality works. That is not how anything works. The theory must be incomplete, must be missing something, must need correction. But 80 years later, the theory has not been corrected, has been confirmed repeatedly, at every scale tested. Molecules of over 2,000 atoms have been placed in quantum superposition, demonstrated to be in two places at once, interference patterns recorded, superposition confirmed. The scale at which superposition breaks down, at which quantum becomes classical, at which Schrödinger's cat must choose alive or dead, remains unknown. No experiment has found the boundary. No theory has located the transition. The measurement problem persists. And the question of what causes collapse, what makes the cat alive or dead, what forces reality to choose, remains the deepest unsolved problem in physics, 90 years after it was formulated. Despite trillions of dollars of research, despite the greatest minds in history working on it, the measurement problem stands, unsolved, taunting. Eugene Wigner took the thought experiment further. Suppose Wigner's friend opens the box and sees the cat. The friend now knows the cat is alive or dead. But Wigner, outside the room, has not looked. From Wigner's perspective, the friend and the cat and the box and the atom are all in superposition. The friend is in superposition of having seen a live cat and having seen a dead cat. Only when Wigner himself looks does the superposition collapse. But who collapses Wigner's superposition, and who collapses that person's? The chain of observers extends without end, unless there is an ultimate observer, an observer outside the chain, an observer who is not in superposition, an observer who observes everything, but is observed by nothing, an observer who collapses all wave functions but whose own state never needs collapsing, an observer who exists outside the system, outside the physical universe, outside the chain of contingent observers. Wigner was not a theologian. He was a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, one of the greatest mathematical minds of the 20th century. And he recognized that the logic of his thought experiment pointed toward consciousness as fundamental and possibly toward an ultimate consciousness that transcends the physical system. He did not say God, not publicly, not in his papers, but the description of the entity his logic requires an observer outside the system who observes everything without being observed, who is not subject to the laws of the system, who makes reality definite through conscious act is structurally identical to the theological description of God, point by point, property by property. The entity Wigner's logic demands has every attribute theology assigns to the divine observer: consciousness, transcendence, creative observation, independence from the physical system, the capacity to make reality definite without itself, requiring another observer to make it definite. Self-sufficient consciousness, consciousness that observes itself, consciousness that is its own ground. In theology, this is called aseity, self-existence, the property of existing through oneself, not dependent on anything else, God's defining characteristic. And Wigner's logic requires exactly this. John von Neumann, the mathematical genius who formalized quantum mechanics, reached a similar conclusion through different reasoning. Von Neumann was not a physicist who dabbled in philosophy. He was arguably the greatest mathematician of the 20th century. He created game theory, laid the foundations of computer science, designed the architecture that every computer on Earth still uses. His mathematical formalization of quantum mechanics remains the standard framework used today. And when he analyzed the measurement problem, he found that the chain of physical interactions never produces collapse on its own. You can describe the atom interacting with the Geiger counter, and the Geiger counter interacting with the hammer, and the hammer interacting with the vial, and the vial interacting with the cat, and the cat interacting with the air and the file, air interacting with the observer's eyes, and the eyes interacting with the brain. At every step, the Schrodinger equation describes the system evolving into larger and larger superpositions. No physical interaction produces collapse. The chain never terminates. The superposition never resolves, unless something outside the physical chain ends it. The only thing that produces collapse in von Neumann's formulation is consciousness, the conscious mind of the observer. Abstract ego, he called it. Something outside the physical chain that is not described by the Schrodinger equation. Something that transcends the physical system. Something that makes reality definite by being aware of it. Von Neumann did not arrive at this conclusion through mysticism or religious conviction. He arrived at it through mathematics. Through rigorous logical analysis of the equations. The equations led him there. Not faith, not hope, not wishful thinking. The mathematics. And there is another parallel we must examine before leaving part 2. The parallel between quantum information and the theological concept of logos. In the beginning was the Word. John 1:1. The Greek word is logos. It means word, but also reason, order, structure, information. God creates through logos, through structured information, through meaningful pattern that produces physical reality. Kun fayakun, says the Quran. Be, and it is. God speaks reality into existence. The word precedes matter. Information precedes the physical. John Archibald Wheeler, one of the most important physicists of the 20th century, the man who coined the terms black hole and wormhole, proposed in 1989, that information is more fundamental than matter. It from bit, he said. Every physical quantity derives its meaning from information. Every particle, every field, every force, ultimately is information, and quantum information theory has confirmed this insight. The holographic principle derived from black hole thermodynamics says, the information content of any region of space is encoded on its boundary. Reality is information structured into physical form. The universe is not matter that happens to contain information. The universe is information that manifests as matter. Logos producing cosmos, the word creating the world. The theological claim and the physical discovery converging on the same extraordinary conclusion. Information is primary, matter is secondary, the word comes first. This is not metaphor. This is the direction physics is moving. Quantum information theory is now one of the most active areas of research in fundamental physics, and its conclusions echo theology with increasing precision. Reality is information. Matter is information in physical form. The universe is written in the language of information. And if information is primary, then the universe has something in common with language, with code, with meaning, with the word that theology says created everything. This is not proof of God. This is physics discovering structures that theology described thousands of years ago. Whether the structures were put there by God or whether they arise from mathematics alone remains the question. The only question. The question that defines everything. This is not mysticism imported into physics. This is the logical consequence of the mathematics. If the Schrodinger equation is universal, if it applies to everything physical, then nothing physical can cause collapse, because the Schrodinger equation does not contain collapse. Collapse must come from outside the physical, from something the Schrodinger equation does not describe, from something non-physical. And the only non-physical thing we know of is consciousness, awareness, the inner experience of being, the thing that you are right now that no equation captures. Now hear what theology says about God's relationship to creation. God observes everything. God's observation is not passive. God's observation is creative. God sustains reality through conscious attention. Without God's attention, reality would dissolve. God is the ultimate observer who makes everything definite by being aware of it. God is conscious. God is outside the physical system. God transcends the laws that govern the physical universe. God is not described by the equations that describe everything else. The parallel is structural and precise. The measurement problem in quantum mechanics requires an entity with exactly the properties theology attributes to God: conscious, outside the physical system, not subject to physical law, making reality definite through observation, sustaining the definiteness of the physical world through ongoing conscious act. Whether this entity is God or whether this entity is ordinary human consciousness is the question that divides interpretations of quantum mechanics. But the mathematical structure requires something with these properties. The equations demand it, not faith, not scripture. The equations. Most physicists avoid this conclusion, find it uncomfortable, find it unscientific, and they have alternatives. Decoherence theory says the environment acts as observer. The quantum system interacts with its environment, and the interaction produces the appearance of collapse without requiring consciousness. Many worlds' interpretation says collapse never happens. Every possibility is realized in a separate branch of reality. The wave function never collapses. It branches, and each branch contains an observer who sees one definite outcome. These interpretations are mathematically consistent. They avoid the need for conscious observer. They avoid the theological implications. But they do not solve the problem. Not fully. Decoherence explains why we do not see superpositions in everyday life. It explains why the table looks solid and the cat looks alive or dead, not both. It explains the appearance of classical reality emerging from quantum substrate, but decoherence does not explain why one outcome becomes real and not the other. It explains the disappearance of interference. It does not explain the selection of a single outcome from the superposition. It pushes the question back one level, replaces the mystery of collapse with the mystery of why this outcome and not that one. The fundamental question remains unanswered. What makes reality choose? Many worlds avoids the question entirely by saying reality does not choose. Every outcome happens. Every possibility is realized. The cat is alive in one branch and dead in another. You see alive in this branch because you are in this branch. Another version of you sees dead in another branch. No collapse, no choice, no mystery. Just infinite branching of the wave function creating infinite parallel realities. But the cost is staggering. Many worlds requires the continuous creation of entire universes at every quantum event. Every measurement, every interaction, every quantum decoherence event spawns new branches, new complete universes, with new complete copies of every particle, every star, every galaxy, every conscious being. The number of universes created per second is incomprehensibly vast, and none of these other universes can be observed, cannot be detected, cannot be communicated with. They are inferred from the mathematics, believed in because the equations seem to require them, but never confirmed by any experiment, never tested by any observation, taken on faith in the mathematics. This is not simpler than God. This is the most extravagant ontological proposal in the history of thought. Trading one God for infinite universes. Trading one supernatural entity for infinite physical entities. Trading one untestable claim for another untestable claim of infinitely greater scope. It is not obvious which requires more faith. Now, entanglement. The most experimentally confirmed and most philosophically disturbing phenomenon in quantum physics. Two particles interact and become entangled. Their quantum states become correlated. Then separate the particles. Send one to Tokyo and one to New York. Measure one particle's spin. The other particle's spin is instantly determined, not after a signal travels between them, not after any delay, instantly, simultaneously, regardless of distance, as if the two particles separated by 11,000 kilometers are still one thing, still connected, still aspects of a single quantum state that transcends the space between them. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, refused to believe it, spent the last decades of his life arguing against it, insisted that local hidden variables must explain the correlation, that the particles carried predetermined values all along like sealed envelopes containing messages written before the envelopes were separated. The measurement merely opened the envelope, revealed the pre-existing message. No spooky action needed, just hidden information. Einstein was the greatest physicist of the century. His intuition had been right about almost everything. About relativity, about the photoelectric effect, about the nature of light. His intuition about entanglement was wrong. In 1964, John Bell, a quiet Northern Irish physicist working at CERN, proved Einstein wrong. Not through experiment, but through mathematics. Bell derived an inequality, a mathematical limit. If Einstein was right, if hidden variables explained the correlations, then measurements on entangled particles would satisfy this inequality, would stay within certain numerical bounds. But if quantum mechanics was right, if the correlations were genuinely non-local, then measurements would violate the inequality, would exceed the bounds, would demonstrate correlations stronger than any local mechanism could produce. In 1982, Alain Aspect in a laboratory in Paris performed the definitive experiment. 3 decades of experimental refinement had led to this moment. Aspect measured entangled photons, measured them at random angles, measured them with the settings changed while the photons were in flight, closed every loophole Einstein might have exploited, and the result was clear. Bell's inequality was violated. Massively, consistently, repeatedly. Quantum mechanics was right. Einstein was wrong. Reality is non-local. The correlations between entangled particles cannot be explained by any local mechanism. Something connects them across space. Something transcends spatial separation. Something makes them one thing even when they appear to be two things separated by the width of the universe. The 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Aspect, Clauser and Zeilinger for this work, the Nobel Committee affirming what the experiments had shown for decades. Reality is non-local. The universe is not made of separate, independent objects occupying separate locations in space. The universe is fundamentally interconnected, entangled, correlated across any distance, as if space does not separate, as if distance is illusion, as if the universe is one thing pretending to be many things. Now hear what theology says. God is not limited by space. God is omnipresent. God's action is not constrained by distance. God connects all things. In God all things hold together. Colossians 1:17. God is closer to you than your jugular vein. Quran 50-16. Brahman is the thread that connects all things. Bhagavad Gita. The universe is one in God. Many in appearance, one in reality. The mystical traditions of every religion converge on this insight. The universe is interconnected in a way that transcends spatial separation. Things that appear separate are aspects of a single reality. The many are one. Separation is illusion. Unity is truth. Rumi the Sufi poet said it 8 centuries ago. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. The mystics did not have Bell inequality experiments, did not have entangled photons, did not have Nobel Prize confirming measurements. They had something else. Contemplation, prayer, meditation, direct experience of the interconnectedness that quantum mechanics would later confirm with equations. The mystic in the cave and the physicist in the laboratory arriving at the same conclusion through different methods. The universe is one. Separation is appearance. Connection is reality. The mystic called the connecting principle God. The physicist calls it entanglement. The name is different. The structure is the same. And the Buddhist tradition reached the same conclusion through yet another path. Pratityasamutpada, dependent origination. Nothing exists independently. Everything arises in dependence on everything else. Every phenomenon is connected to every other phenomenon. The universe is a web of mutual dependence where nothing stands alone. Remove one thread and the web changes entirely. Quantum entanglement is this web made visible, made measurable, made experimentally confirmable. The Buddhist insight formalized in equations. The spiritual intuition validated by particle physics. Quantum entanglement confirms all of this, experimentally, precisely, repeatedly. Two particles are one thing. Separation is appearance. Unity is the underlying quantum state, and the Nobel Prize certifies it. This is not speculation, not interpretation, not philosophy. This is measured, confirmed, award-winning physics. The universe is non-local. Things are connected across space. Separation is not fundamental. Unity is. The parallel with theology is exact, not approximate, not metaphorical. Exact. The universe is interconnected. Physics says so. Theology says so. Both point to unity beneath diversity. Both say separation is surface. Both say connection is fundamental. They disagree about the nature of the connection. Physics says entangled quantum state. Theology says God. But the phenomenon they describe is the same. Non-local correlation, universal interconnection, oneness beneath the appearance of multiplicity. And here is something most discussions of this topic miss. Something that transforms the parallels from collection of coincidences into something far more significant. The parallels are not independent. They are connected. Creation from nothing and sustaining reality and non-locality and observer dependence are not separate features of quantum mechanics that happen independently to resemble separate features of theology. They are aspects of a single mathematical framework, the quantum formalism, one set of equations, one theory, one unified mathematical description of reality. And the properties of God they resemble omnipotence and sustaining power, and omnipresence and creative consciousness are not separate theological claims that happen independently to match. They are aspects of a single theological claim, the claim that reality has a conscious ground that creates and sustains everything. Think about what this means. If the parallels were between unrelated features of unrelated systems, the probability of coincidence would be higher. Random chance can produce isolated correspondences, but these are not isolated. They are connected within each system. They emerge from the same mathematical structure in physics and the same theological structure in religion. The entire shape of quantum mechanics, the whole architecture of the theory, matches the entire shape of theology, the whole architecture of divine creation. This is not 10 separate coincidences. This is one deep structural correspondence manifesting in 10 ways. And one structural correspondence is far harder to explain as coincidence than 10 isolated ones. Imagine finding a key. If the key has one tooth that happens to match one pin in a lock, that might be coincidence. If the key has 10 teeth and every tooth matches every pin in the lock, the key was made for the lock. Or the lock was made for the key. The quantum formalism is a key with 10 teeth. Theology is a lock with 10 pins. Every tooth matches every pin. Either this is the most extraordinary coincidence in the history of mathematics, or the key and the lock belong to each other. Either quantum mechanics accidentally produces a mathematical structure identical to divine creation, or quantum mechanics is the mathematical description of divine creation. Either God accidentally looks like quantum mechanics or quantum mechanics was designed by God. The parallels are aspects of a single parallel, The quantum formalism looks like the mathematical description of God's creative act, not in one way, in every way, not in one parallel, in 10. And the parallels are not isolated coincidences but connected aspects of a single deep correspondence between the mathematical structure of quantum mechanics and the theological structure of divine creation. This is either the most important fact about reality or the most impressive example of human pattern recognition applied to meaningless data. Either physics has discovered the mathematical structure of divine creation, or the human mind has imposed theological patterns on physical data, because imposing patterns is what human minds do. Either the equations contain God, or the mind projects God onto the equations. Either the key fits the lock because they were made for each other, or the key fits the lock because we are imagining the fit. And the terrifying possibility is that we cannot tell which. That the evidence is genuinely ambiguous. That the parallels are real but their meaning is undetermined. That the mathematics is precise but its interpretation is open. That the experiments confirm the phenomena but do not reveal whether the phenomena are designed or accidental. That we are stuck in the space between God and quantum, not able to prove either, not able to dismiss either, living in the gap, the most consequential gap in the history of human thought, the gap between mechanism and meaning, between equation and purpose, between the how that physics masters and the why that physics cannot touch. In part 3, we enter that gap. We ask what the world's great theological traditions say about a God who works through mathematics, what the mystics understood about physics before physics existed, what the philosophers of religion make of quantum mechanics, and we confront the traditions directly: Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, each tradition with its own understanding of creation, each tradition with its own account of the relationship between consciousness and reality, each tradition now facing the same question: does quantum mechanics confirm what we have always believed? Or does quantum mechanics describe a universe where our beliefs are unnecessary? And we ask the hardest question of all: not whether God exists, not whether quantum mechanics is correct, but whether the question itself, whether God or quantum is the wrong question, whether the word or should be replaced by the word and, whether the deepest truth is not God or quantum, but God and quantum, not two explanations competing, but one reality, revealing itself through two languages, the language of equations and the language of faith, both incomplete, both necessary, both pointing at the same incomprehensible truth, the truth that lives in the gap, where no one has the final answer, and where perhaps no one ever will. The mystics knew, before the laboratories, before the equations, before the particle accelerators, and the Bell tests, and the Casimir measurements, before any of it. The mystics knew, not in the language of mathematics, not with the precision of experiment, not with the rigor of peer review, but they knew. They described the structure of reality with an accuracy that should be impossible for people who had no access to the tools of modern physics. No microscopes, no telescopes, no particle detectors, no interferometers, nothing but the human mind turned inward, contemplating, praying, meditating, sitting in silence until the silence spoke. And what the silence told them matches what the particle accelerators tell us, with structural precision, with architectural accuracy, with correspondences so specific that calling them coincidence requires more faith than calling them discovery. And the question of how they knew is a question that physics cannot answer, because physics explains what reality is. Physics does not explain how a 13th century Sufi poet could describe quantum entanglement 800 years before it was experimentally confirmed. Does not explain how an 8th century Hindu philosopher could describe the measurement problem 12 centuries before Schrodinger formalized it. does not explain how a 2nd century Buddhist logician could describe quantum indeterminacy 18 centuries before Heisenberg derived the uncertainty principle. Physics explains the structure. Physics does not explain how the mystics knew the structure. Consider what they said, not vaguely, not approximately, precisely, statement by statement, claim by claim, structure by structure. Meister Eckhart, Dominican friar, 13th century Germany, the most radical Christian mystic in history. He said God is not a being among beings. God is being itself, the ground of all existence, not something that exists, the reason anything exists. Remove God, and you do not remove one thing from the universe. You remove the universe, everything, all at once. Because everything depends on God the way a reflection depends on the mirror. The reflection is not separate from the mirror, is not independent, is entirely dependent at every moment. Remove the mirror, and the reflection does not gradually fade. It ceases, instantly, completely, was never independently real. This is the quantum vacuum. The quantum fields are not things that exist in space. They are the ground of existence. The reason particles exist. Remove the electron field, and electrons do not gradually decay. They cease, instantly, completely, were never independently real, were always excitations of the field, always dependent, always reflections in the mirror. Eckhart described quantum field theory 700 years before quantum field theory existed, not approximately, precisely, the same structure, the same dependence, the same relationship between ground and manifestation. And Eckhart went further. He said that God creates through a single act that is simultaneously all acts. God does not create this thing and then that thing. God creates everything in one eternal now. The diversity of creation unfolds in time, but the creative act itself is timeless. One act, one word, one gesture, producing everything. This is the quantum vacuum state. One mathematical object, the ground state of all quantum fields from which all particles, all forces, all structures emerge. One thing producing everything. Not sequentially, simultaneously. The vacuum state does not create the electron field first and the quark field second. All fields exist simultaneously in the vacuum. All possibilities present at once. One ground manifesting as infinite diversity, Eckhart's God creating everything in one eternal act. The vacuum state generating everything from one mathematical structure. The correspondence is not vague, it is architectural. Ibn Arabi, Sufi philosopher, 12th century Andalusia, the greatest metaphysician in Islamic history. He described the universe as tajalli, divine self-disclosure, God revealing God's nature through creation. Every created thing is a face of God, a manifestation of a divine attribute. The universe is not separate from God. The universe is God's self-expression, God's way of knowing God's own nature through manifestation, and the manifestation is continuous, not past event, present process. God manifesting now, through everything, through every particle, every field, every force, every phenomenon. The universe is God, expressing in time what God is in eternity. This is quantum field theory described in theological language. The quantum fields express themselves through particles. Every particle is a manifestation of an underlying field, an excitation, a face. The field expressing itself through the particle the way Ibn Arabi says God expresses through creation. The parallel is not metaphorical, it is structural. The mathematical relationship between field and particle is the same as the theological relationship between God and creation in Ibn Arabi's system. Ground manifesting as phenomenon, underlying reality expressing as surface appearance, the one becoming the many without ceasing to be one. Ibn Arabi described 99 divine names. 99 attributes of God, each name a different face of the same reality. Al-Khaliq, the creator. Al-Muhi, the giver of life. Al-Mumit, the bringer of death. Al-Nur, the light. Al-Batin, the hidden. Al-Zahir, the manifest. 99 attributes, one God. The attributes are not parts of God. God is not divisible. The attributes are faces, perspectives, the one reality seen from different angles, and the universe is the manifestation of these attributes. Every created thing embodies a combination of divine names, is a specific expression of specific attributes. The universe is the complete expression of all 99 names, God's nature fully manifest in the totality of creation. The standard model of particle physics describes 17 fundamental particles, each particle a different excitation of underlying quantum fields, each with different properties, different masses, different charges, different spins, 17 particles, a handful of fields, one quantum formalism. The particles are not separate things, they are faces of the fields, different expressions of the same underlying mathematical structure. The up quark and the down quark and the electron and the photon and the Higgs boson are the 99 names of the quantum vacuum, the many faces of the one ground state. Ibn Arabi's theology mapped onto the standard model with structural precision. Nagarjuna, Buddhist philosopher. 2nd century India. Founder of Madhyamaka, the middle way between existence and non-existence, perhaps the most rigorous logician in the history of philosophy. Nagarjuna did not speculate, he argued, step by step, premise to conclusion, with a logical precision that rivals any modern analytic philosopher, and his conclusion was devastating. Nothing has inherent existence, nothing exists from its own side. Everything is empty of inherent nature. Sunyata, emptiness, not the emptiness of non-existence, not void, not absence, the emptiness of independent self-nature. Everything exists, but nothing exists independently. Everything arises in dependence on conditions, on causes, on context, on observation. Nothing is what it is by itself. Everything is what it is in relation to everything else. Remove the relations and the thing vanishes, not because it was destroyed, because it was never independently real. This is quantum mechanics. Particles do not have inherent properties, do not have definite position, momentum, spin until measured, until observed, until placed in context. The electron has no position in itself, has position only in relation to measurement, has properties only in relation to observation. Nagarjuna's emptiness and quantum indeterminacy are the same insight expressed in different vocabularies. Nothing has inherent properties. Everything depends on context. Everything arises in relation. Nothing exists from its own side. The Buddhist philosopher and the quantum physicist agreeing across 2,000 years that reality is not what it appears, that the solid, independent, self-existing objects of everyday experience are neither solid, nor independent, nor self-existing, that underneath the appearance of substance is a web of relations, a network of dependencies, a dance of context and observation, emptiness, sunyata, superposition, different words, same truth. Shankara, Hindu philosopher, 8th century India, the great exponent of Advaita Vedanta. Non-dualism, the most radical ontological claim in the history of human thought. Shankara taught that Brahman, the ultimate reality, is consciousness, pure consciousness, not consciousness of something, consciousness itself, not an attribute of some entity, the only entity, the ground of all experience, the substrate of all reality. Everything that exists is Brahman, and the physical universe Maya is the appearance of Brahman, modified by name and form. The universe is not separate from Brahman, is not created by Brahman as separate thing, is Brahman appearing as universe. The way a rope in dim light appears as snake. The snake is not real in itself. The rope is real, but the snake is not nothing. It is the rope misperceived. The universe is Brahman misperceived, not unreal. Misperceived, not nothing, not separate, not independent. The appearance of the one ultimate consciousness in the form of multiplicity. And when the misperception is corrected, when ignorance is removed, the universe does not disappear. It is recognized as what it always was. Brahman, consciousness. The one thing, pretending to be many things. This is the measurement problem resolved from the Hindu perspective. Consciousness is fundamental, not emergent, not product of brain, not generated by neurons. Consciousness is the ground, the substrate, the Brahman from which everything arises, and the physical universe is the appearance of this consciousness. The wave function collapsed into classical appearance by observation, by consciousness. By Brahman observing itself and seeing the universe, the observer and the observed are one. The consciousness that collapses the wave function and the wave function that is collapsed are aspects of a single reality. Brahman, consciousness, the one thing that exists. 4 traditions, 4 continents, 4 millennia, the same structure. Reality depends on a conscious ground. The physical world is manifestation of something deeper. Separation is appearance. Unity is truth. Consciousness is fundamental, not emergent. The observer and the observed are connected at the deepest level, and quantum mechanics confirms each of these insights with experimental precision. But does it really? Or are we doing what humans always do, forcing the comparison, seeing what we want to see, finding quantum mechanics in the mystics, because we are looking for quantum mechanics in the mystics. Projection, not discovery. Confirmation bias, not confirmation. This is the honest objection, the necessary objection, the objection that intellectual integrity requires, and it has real force. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine evolved over millions of years to detect patterns, because detecting patterns meant survival. The early human who saw a pattern in the grass and thought tiger survived even if the tiger was not there. The early human who saw no pattern and thought nothing was eaten. Evolution selected for false positives, for pattern recognition that errs on the side of seeing patterns that are not there rather than missing patterns that are. Our brains are built to find meaning, built to see connection, built to detect design, built to project intelligence onto the universe. This is our deepest cognitive bias. And when we look at quantum mechanics and see God, we might be doing exactly what our brains evolved to do, seeing the tiger that is not there, finding the pattern that does not exist, projecting meaning onto meaningless mathematics. And the history of science is full of false parallels. People have seen God in the orbits of planets, in the laws of thermodynamics, in the theory of evolution. In every scientific advance, someone has claimed divine confirmation. And every time the parallel turned out to be superficial, projected, forced. The universe kept not being designed in the way people thought it was designed. Is the quantum parallel any different? Or is it just the latest in a long series of projections? The newest data set onto which the human mind imposes its preferred pattern? But consider this. The previous parallels were vague. Seeing God in planetary orbits was vague. The orbits are elliptical. So what? Ellipses do not have theological content. Seeing God in thermodynamics was vague. Entropy increases. So what? Increasing disorder has no obvious theological parallel. The previous parallels were projections because they lacked structural specificity. They were humans saying, this is beautiful, therefore God. Or this is complex, therefore God. Vague, unspecific, easily dismissed. The quantum parallels are not vague. The mystics made specific structural claims, not vague gestures toward interconnectedness. Specific, testable claims about the nature of reality, that the ground is conscious. That manifestation depends on the ground continuously, that nothing has independent existence, that observer and observed are connected, that separation is appearance, that unity is truth. These are testable structural claims, not in the sense that you can put them in a laboratory, but in the sense that if reality turns out to have a different structure, the claims would be wrong. If physics discovered that particles have definite properties independent of observation, Nagarjuna would be wrong. If physics discovered that the vacuum is truly empty, that nothing creates nothing, Eckhart would be wrong. If physics discovered that entanglement is illusion, that things are truly separate, that locality is absolute, the mystics would all be wrong. Physics discovered the opposite. Every single time, on every testable structural claim, particles do not have definite properties independent of observation. Nagarjuna confirmed. The vacuum is not empty. Eckhart confirmed. Entanglement is real. Locality fails. The mystics of interconnection confirmed. Ibn Arabi said, creation is continuous self-disclosure. The vacuum fluctuates continuously. Confirmed. Shankara said consciousness is fundamental, not emergent. The measurement problem remains unsolved without consciousness. Consistent. 4 traditions, 4 sets of specific claims, 0 contradicted by experiment. Every claim either confirmed or consistent with confirmed physics. The probability of this by coincidence decreases with each confirmation. 1 correct prediction might be luck, 2 might be coincidence, 3 is suspicious. 4 traditions, each making multiple structural claims about the nature of reality, and every claim turning out to be either confirmed or consistent with quantum mechanics, is a pattern that demands explanation. Either the mystics were extraordinarily lucky, or the mystics were describing something real. Either their contemplative methods gave them genuine insight into the structure of reality, or the most improbable coincidence in intellectual history occurred independently on 4 continents across 4 millennia. Now consider what it would mean if God exists and chose quantum mechanics as the language of creation, not as metaphor, as literal claim. God, designing the mathematical structure of reality, choosing the Schrodinger equation, setting the commutation relations, calibrating the fine structure constant to 1 over 137, 35,999, selecting the gauge symmetries, SU 3 times, SU 2 times U1, designing the quantum formalism with intention and purpose. What kind of God would this be? It would be a God of extraordinary elegance, because quantum mechanics is elegant, not beautiful in the obvious way, not beautiful like a sunset or a symphony, beautiful in the deep mathematical way that only those who understand the formalism can fully appreciate. The kind of beauty that made Paul Dirac say God is a mathematician of the most exquisite order. That made Werner Heisenberg say, when I meet God, I am going to ask him 2 questions. Why relativity? And why turbulence? I really believe he will have an answer for the first. Heisenberg, the man who discovered the uncertainty principle, believed the mathematical structure of reality was so elegant that only God could explain it. The Dirac equation, written in 1928. 4 components. 1 equation, predicting not just the behavior of the electron, but the existence of antimatter. Dirac did not discover antimatter in a laboratory. He discovered it in the mathematics. The equation demanded a second solution, a mirror particle, an anti-electron, the positron, predicted from pure mathematical symmetry, confirmed 4 years later in cosmic ray experiments. The mathematics knew about antimatter before the experimentalists did. The equation contained a feature of reality that no one had seen, no one had imagined, no one had predicted by any other method. The mathematics itself revealed a hidden layer of the universe, as if the mathematical language of physics contains truths about reality that transcend human intention. as if the equations know more than the people who write them, as if the formalism has depth that its creators did not put there, depth that was already present, waiting to be discovered, built in. Richard Feynman developed the path integral formulation. Instead of a particle traveling along one path from A to B, the particle travels along all possible paths simultaneously. Every path in the universe, straight lines, curved lines, lines that go to the moon and back, lines that cross the galaxy and return, every possible trajectory, each weighted by a complex number, the sum of all paths produces the probability of the particle arriving at B. This sounds insane, is also correct, produces predictions that match experiment to extraordinary precision. And the mathematical structure, the sum over all possible histories, is breathtaking in its audacity. Reality does not choose one path. Reality computes all paths, weighs them, interferes them, and produces the outcome from the sum, as if the universe has infinite computational power, as if the universe considers every possibility before selecting the actual. The gauge principle, the deepest structural insight in modern physics. Every force in the universe, electromagnetism, the strong force, the weak force, arises from a local symmetry requirement. If the laws of physics must look the same regardless of certain local transformations, then forces must exist to compensate for the transformations. The existence of forces is logically necessary given the symmetry requirements. Electromagnetism exists because the laws of physics must be invariant under local phase rotations of the electron field. The strong force exists because the laws must be invariant under local color rotations of quark fields. Forces are not added to the universe by hand. They are required by the mathematical structure. They follow from symmetry the way the Pythagorean theorem follows from the definition of a right triangle, necessarily, inevitably, elegantly. A God who designed this would be a mathematician of infinite subtlety, would have chosen not the simplest possible physics but the most elegant possible physics, not the most obvious creation but the most sophisticated, a creation where the deepest features are hidden, where the surface appearance of solid classical reality conceals the quantum substrate, where you have to work very hard, think very carefully, build very precise instruments to discover the truth. A God who hides in the equations, who reveals through the equations but only to those who study the equations with sufficient dedication. A God who rewards curiosity, who rewards persistence, who rewards the human drive to understand, who created a universe where the deepest truths are accessible but not obvious, where discovery is possible but not automatic, where you have to earn the understanding. Eugene Wigner wrote a famous essay in 1960 called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences. He was troubled by a mystery that physics cannot explain. Why does mathematics work so well for describing reality? Mathematics is abstract, created by human minds, deals with logical structures that need not correspond to anything physical, and yet mathematics describes the physical universe with uncanny precision, not approximately, exactly. The most abstract mathematical structures invented by pure mathematicians with no interest in physics turn out years or decades later to describe physical phenomena perfectly. Riemannian geometry, invented as pure mathematics, turns out to be the language of general relativity. Group theory, developed as abstract algebra, turns out to describe particle symmetries exactly. Hilbert spaces, created as mathematical abstraction, turn out to be the framework for quantum mechanics. Why? Why does abstract mathematics map onto physical reality with such precision? If the universe is accidental, if physics is not designed, if there is no mathematician behind the mathematics, then the correspondence between abstract mathematical structures and physical reality is the most astonishing coincidence in intellectual history. Mathematics should not work this well. There is no reason for it to work this well, unless the universe is mathematical, unless reality is structured by mathematics, unless something mathematical designed reality, unless the God of the physicists is a mathematician whose thoughts are equations and whose creative acts are symmetry principles. This is not the God of easy answers, not the God of simple faith, not the God who reveals everything in one book or one prophet or one revelation. This is the God of progressive discovery, of layered truth, of depth beyond depth. The God who gave Moses the burning bush and Aspect the bell test, who spoke to Muhammad in a cave and to Heisenberg through a matrix, who illuminated the Buddha under a tree and Dirac with an equation, who whispered to Eckhart in a monastery and to Wheeler in a laboratory. Different languages, different eras, different methods, different cultures, same truth arriving in different forms at different times through different channels, each revelation partial, each discovery incomplete, each tradition capturing one face of a reality too vast for any single tradition to contain. The God who never gives the final answer, because the final answer would end the search, and the search is the point. The journey into understanding is the purpose. The question is the answer. And this God would be consistent with every theological tradition while being identical with none. Would be the God of Islam working through quantum mechanics, the Brahman of Hinduism manifesting as quantum fields, the Dharmakaya of Buddhism expressing as dependent origination at the quantum level, the Logos of Christianity writing the laws of physics in mathematical language. Each tradition would recognize aspects of its God in quantum mechanics. None would recognize the whole, because the God who designed quantum mechanics would be bigger than any theology, would exceed any scripture, would transcend any tradition, would be the reality that all traditions approximate but none fully capture. This is either the most profound theological insight of the 21st century, or the most elaborate rationalization for believing in God despite the absence of direct evidence. And once again we are stuck in the gap between the parallels that point toward God and the absence of direct evidence that confirms God, the gap between the mathematical structure that looks designed and the impossibility of proving design, the gap where faith and physics meet and neither can prove the other wrong. But there is one more dimension to this question that we have not examined, the dimension that transforms the intellectual puzzle into an existential crisis, the personal dimension. Because the question of God or quantum is not abstract, not academic, not something that only matters to physicists and theologians debating in conference halls. It matters to you, personally, directly, urgently, right now, because the answer determines what your consciousness is, what your experience means, what your existence amounts to. Whether the awareness behind your eyes, reading these words, processing these ideas, is the universe knowing itself through you, or whether it is electrochemical activity in a biological organ that will cease when the organ stops functioning and leave no trace that it ever existed. Think about what you are doing right now. You are aware, conscious, experiencing. There is something it is like to be you. There is an inner life, a first-person perspective, a subjective experience of existing. You are not just processing information the way a computer processes information. You are experiencing the processing. There is a light on inside, an awareness, a you. And the question of God or quantum is the question of what that light is, where it comes from, what happens to it when your body dies, whether it is fundamental feature of reality or temporary accident of biology, whether you are window through which the universe observes itself or briefly flickering candle in infinite darkness. If God exists, and quantum mechanics is God's creation, then your consciousness is not accident, not side effect, not emergent property of sufficient neural complexity that appeared by chance on a minor planet orbiting a mediocre star in the unfashionable western spiral arm of a perfectly ordinary galaxy. Your consciousness is intended, designed, purposed. The universe was fine-tuned to produce you, not generically, not any consciousness. You, this specific awareness, this particular perspective, this unique window into reality. The quantum fields were calibrated to sustain you. The measurement problem exists because consciousness is fundamental, because you are fundamental, because the observer, the aware experiencer, the you that reads these words is not peripheral to reality, but central, is not product of reality, but prerequisite, is not generated by the universe, but the thing that makes the universe definite. That gives it actuality. That converts quantum possibility into classical fact. You are not in the universe. The universe is in you, in your consciousness, in your observation, in your awareness that makes the quantum definite and the possible actual. If quantum mechanics is all there is and God does not exist, then your consciousness is accident, product, side effect, lucky arrangement of atoms that happens to generate experience. The universe did not intend you, did not know you were coming, did not plan for your arrival, does not care that you are here, will not miss you when you are gone. Your awareness is electrochemistry, complex electrochemistry, remarkable electrochemistry, but electrochemistry nonetheless. Your meaning is self-generated illusion. Your purpose is self-created fiction. You are the universe temporarily arranged in a pattern that experiences. And when the pattern dissolves, the experience ends and the universe continues without you, without noticing, without pausing, without remembering, because there is nothing to notice, no one to pause, nothing to remember with, just quantum fields, fluctuating in a void that never asked to be measured and does not know that it is. Both possibilities are terrifying, in different ways, for different reasons, but equally terrifying. God watching is terrifying because it means you matter, genuinely matter, not in the self-help book sense of you matter because you tell yourself you matter, in the cosmic sense, in the built into the fabric of reality sense. It means your choices matter, your actions are witnessed, your thoughts are known. Your intentions are registered by something that transcends time and space and death. It means consciousness is permanent and purpose is real, and you cannot escape the weight of being observed by something infinite, something that sees not just your actions but your motivations, not just your words but your thoughts, not just your thoughts but the thoughts behind your thoughts. The consciousness that collapses your wave function is itself never collapsed, never dissolves, never looks away. You are permanently observed, permanently known, permanently held in awareness by something you cannot hide from, cannot deceive, cannot escape. And if your choices are witnessed by infinite consciousness, then your choices carry infinite weight. Every kindness matters, every cruelty matters, every moment of courage and every moment of cowardice, all of it registered, all of it permanent, all of it woven into the fabric of a reality that never forgets. The void not watching is terrifying because it means you do not matter, cannot matter. There is nothing to matter to. It means nothing matters. Nothing can matter. There is no audience for your existence, no witness to your struggle, no record of your consciousness. You are alone in a universe that will forget you existed the moment your neurons stop firing. Your children will die. Their children will die. The human species will end. The earth will be swallowed by the sun will burn out, the stars will die, the protons will decay, the universe will reach heat death, and nothing will remain of you. Not a trace, not a memory, not a mark. The universe that accidentally produced your consciousness will continue for eternity without your consciousness, and the eternity will be exactly the same as if you had never existed. Your life has no more cosmic significance than the brief flicker of a virtual particle in the quantum vacuum, appearing from nothing, existing for an instant, returning to nothing, and the nothing does not notice. God or quantum, permanent meaning or temporary accident, eternal consciousness or temporary electrochemistry, infinite significance or cosmic irrelevance. The question is not academic. The question is not philosophical game. The question is about what happens to the awareness reading these words, whether it persists or perishes, whether the love you feel connects you to something eternal, or whether it is neurochemical accident in a dying animal on a cooling rock orbiting a mediocre star. And the most extraordinary fact about this question is that quantum mechanics itself does not resolve it. The most precise theory in the history of science, the most tested, the most confirmed, the most powerful. And it leaves the most important question unanswered, not because the question is outside physics, because the question is at the center of physics. The measurement problem is the question. What is consciousness? What role does the observer play? What makes reality definite? These are not philosophical questions imposed on physics from outside. These are the central unsolved problems of the most fundamental physical theory ever devised. Physics itself is asking what consciousness is. Physics itself does not know the answer. And in part 4 we confront the final question. Not God or quantum, but God and quantum. The possibility that the question is wrong, that the alternatives are false, that the deepest truth transcends the dichotomy, that the universe is trying to tell us something that neither physics alone nor theology alone can hear, something that can only be heard in the space between them, in the gap, in the silence between the equations, in the pause between the prayers, where the mathematics ends and the mystery begins, where the measurement stops and the meaning starts, where the how of physics and the why of theology dissolve into a single question that is simultaneously the oldest question humanity has ever asked and the newest question physics has ever discovered. What is reality? And why does it contain you? What if the question is wrong? Not wrong in the sense that it should not be asked. Wrong in the sense that it contains a hidden assumption that distorts the answer. A hidden assumption that has been operating beneath everything we have discussed for 3 parts. The assumption is in the word or God or quantum. The assumption is that these are mutually exclusive options, that you must choose one and reject the other, that the truth is on one side of the divide, that the parallels either prove God or are coincidence, that quantum mechanics either describes divine creation or describes godless mechanism, that meaning and mathematics cannot coexist, that purpose and physics cannot both be real, that you must choose. God or quantum, faith or science, meaning or mechanism, one or the other, not both, never both. What if both? We have spent 3 parts asking God or quantum, examining the parallels, investigating the experiments, consulting the mystics, weighing the evidence, measuring the gap between faith and physics. And after all of it, we are stuck. The parallels point toward God, the differences point away. The evidence is genuinely ambiguous. The mathematics is precise, but its meaning is open. The experiments confirm the phenomena, but do not reveal whether the phenomena are designed or accidental. We are stuck in the gap. And we have assumed the gap exists because we have not found the answer yet. That more evidence, more experiments, more mathematics will eventually resolve the question. Will push us toward God or toward quantum, toward purpose or toward accident, toward meaning or toward mechanism. But what if the gap is not a problem to be solved? What if the gap is the answer? What if the reason we cannot choose between God and quantum is that we are not supposed to choose? What if the question God or quantum is like asking, is light a wave or a particle? A question that sounds like it demands a choice between 2 mutually exclusive options. A question that physics spent decades agonizing over. A question that turned out to be wrong. Not because the options were wrong, but because the word or was wrong. Light is not a wave or a particle. Light is both, simultaneously. Depending on how you observe it, The wave nature and the particle nature are not competing descriptions. They are complementary descriptions, two faces of one reality, neither complete on its own, both necessary together. Wave and particle, not or. And Niels Bohr recognized this in 1928 and called it complementarity, the deepest principle in quantum mechanics, perhaps the deepest principle in all of physics. Some questions do not have single answers. Some realities cannot be captured by single descriptions. Some truths require two apparently contradictory frameworks held simultaneously. Not because we lack the intelligence to choose between them, not because we have not done enough experiments, not because our theories are incomplete, because reality itself is both, is genuinely both, contains both, transcends the categories we use to describe it. The wave is real, the particle is real. The contradiction between them is apparent, not actual. The reality that contains both is deeper than either description. And the reality can only be fully known by holding both descriptions simultaneously, by refusing to choose, by living in the and rather than the or. Bohr was so convinced of this principle that he chose a coat of arms when he was knighted. The symbol on his coat of arms was the Yin Yang, the ancient Chinese symbol of complementary opposites, light and dark, male and female, action and rest, not competing, completing, each containing the seed of the other, each necessary for the other, each meaningless without the other. Bohr inscribed beneath it the Latin motto, contraria sunt complementa, opposites are complementary. The man who understood quantum mechanics more deeply than anyone recognized that the deepest truth is not found in choosing between opposites but in holding them together. Now, apply complementarity to God and quantum, not as metaphor, as structural principle. What if God and quantum mechanics are complementary descriptions of the same reality? What if the theological framework and the physical framework are wave and particle, two faces of one truth, neither complete on its own, both necessary together? What if the reason the parallels are so precise is that both descriptions point at the same thing? And the reason the differences exist is that each description captures aspects the other cannot. The way wave captures interference and particle captures localization, each real, each incomplete, each necessary. If this is true, then the war between science and religion was never real, was always a category error, was always the equivalent of arguing whether light is really a wave or really a particle. Both sides certain they were right, both sides certain the other was wrong, both sides missing the deeper truth that transcends the argument, the truth that light is both, that reality is both, that God and quantum are both, not competing, complementary, not contradictory, supplementary, not either or, both and. This is not compromise, not diplomatic gesture, not splitting the difference. This is the deepest insight quantum mechanics offers, that reality is richer than any single description, that the universe exceeds our categories, that the truth is always bigger than the framework we use to capture it. And if this principle applies to waves and particles to position, and momentum to energy and time, then why would it not apply to God and quantum? Why would it not apply to the deepest question of all? Consider what each description captures that the other cannot. Carefully, precisely, without exaggeration. Physics captures mechanism, how the universe works, the equations of motion, the symmetry principles, the quantitative predictions, the 12 decimal places of precision. Physics tells you that the vacuum creates particles, tells you how many, how fast, with what energy, with what probability, tells you that entangled particles are correlated, calculates the exact correlation, predicts the exact violation of Bell's inequality, measures the exact force of the Casimir effect. Physics gives you the how with extraordinary precision. the most precise descriptions in the history of human knowledge, but physics does not give you the why. Does not tell you why there is a vacuum rather than nothing, why the equations have the form they have rather than some other form, why the constants have the values they have rather than some other values, why anything exists at all rather than nothing existing. The why is outside physics, not because physics has not yet found it, because the why is not the kind of question physics can answer. Physics answers how questions with superhuman precision. Why questions require a different framework, a different language, a different mode of investigation. Theology captures meaning, why the universe exists, what purpose creation serves, what consciousness is for, what your life means in the larger scheme, what love connects to, what death opens into. Theology tells you that creation is intentional, that consciousness matters, that your existence has significance beyond chemistry, that love is not accident but design, that the universe cares about what happens in it, that your choices have weight beyond their physical consequences. Theology gives you the why with extraordinary depth. Thousands of years of the most profound human minds contemplating the meaning of existence, but theology does not give you the how, does not tell you the mechanism of creation, does not predict the mass of the Higgs boson, does not calculate the anomalous magnetic moment of the electron, does not derive the gauge symmetries from first principles, does not provide the 12 decimal places. The how is outside theology. Not because theology has not yet found it, because the how is not the kind of question theology can answer. Theology answers why questions with superhuman depth. How questions require a different framework. God and quantum, why and how, meaning and mechanism. Complementary descriptions of a reality that contains both, that requires both, that cannot be fully captured by either alone. The physicist who says there is no God, because physics explains everything, is like the person who says light is only a wave, because wave theory explains interference. Correct about the interference, wrong about the light. The theologian who says physics is irrelevant, because God explains everything, is like the person who says light is only a particle, because particles explain the photoelectric effect. Correct about the photoelectric effect, wrong about the light, both right about their part, both wrong about the whole, both missing the complementary truth that makes reality complete. And here is where consciousness enters, not as side topic, not as philosophical digression, as the central topic, as the bridge between God and quantum, as the thing that makes complementarity possible, as the phenomenon that forces the two descriptions to meet, because consciousness is the one phenomenon that exists in both frameworks simultaneously. In physics, consciousness is the observer that collapses the wave function, the thing that makes quantum possibility become classical actuality, the element that the Schrodinger equation does not describe, but that makes the Schrodinger equation meaningful. In theology, consciousness is the image of God, the divine spark, the fragment of cosmic awareness embedded in matter, the reason creation exists, the purpose of the universe. In both frameworks, consciousness has special status, is not just another physical phenomenon among physical phenomena, is something more, something different, something that cannot be fully captured by either framework alone, something that bridges the gap between mechanism and meaning, between how and why, between quantum and God. And this is not coincidence. This is the most significant fact in the entire investigation. The one phenomenon that both frameworks treat as special is the same phenomenon, consciousness. The one thing physics cannot fully explain is the one thing theology places at the center. The measurement problem and the hard problem are the same problem seen from different angles. The physicist asks what makes quantum indeterminacy become classical definiteness. The theologian asks what connects the human soul to the divine ground. Both are asking what consciousness is, Both are asking what the observer is. Both are placing consciousness at the center of their deepest unsolved question, and neither can answer the question alone. The hard problem of consciousness, the problem of explaining why there is subjective experience, why there is something it is like to be you, is the deepest unsolved problem in both science and philosophy. David Chalmers, who coined the term, argued that consciousness cannot be explained by physical processes alone, that no amount of description of neural firing patterns and electrochemical reactions will ever explain why those physical processes produce inner experience, why the neural correlates of red produce the experience of red, why information processing feels like something from the inside. The explanatory gap between physical process and subjective experience is absolute, unbridgeable, by physical explanation alone. This is the measurement problem translated into philosophy of mind. The measurement problem asks, what makes quantum possibility become classical actuality? The hard problem asks, what makes neural activity become conscious experience? Both problems involve a gap between objective description and subjective reality. Both problems resist solution by physical mechanism alone. Both problems suggest that something beyond the physical is involved, something that transcends mechanism, something that the equations do not capture, something that exists in the space between the descriptions, in the gap. And if consciousness is the bridge between God and quantum, then the gap between them is not empty. The gap is consciousness. The gap is you. You are the place where mechanism and meaning meet, where equations become experience, where quantum possibility becomes conscious actuality, where the how of physics and the why of theology converge in a single point of awareness that contains both. Your consciousness is simultaneously physical process and divine spark, simultaneously quantum computation and cosmic awareness, simultaneously mechanism and meaning, simultaneously explainable by equations and inexplicable by equations, both and, not or. This is not mystical speculation. This is the logical consequence of taking both physics and theology seriously. If physics is correct, then consciousness is involved in the measurement process. If theology is correct, then consciousness is connected to the divine. If both are correct, then consciousness is the intersection, the point where God meets quantum mechanics, the place in reality where both descriptions are simultaneously true, and that place is you, is your awareness, is the experience you are having right now, reading these words, the experience that is simultaneously electrical activity in your neurons and something more, something that the neurons do not explain, something that the equations do not capture, something that exists in the gap between every description of you and the reality of being you. Wheeler proposed the participatory universe, the most radical idea in the history of physics, more radical than relativity, more radical than quantum mechanics itself. The idea that observers are not passive witnesses to a pre-existing reality, but active participants in creating reality. That the universe does not exist in a definite state waiting to be observed. That the universe exists in quantum superposition of all possible states until consciousness makes it definite, and the observers who make the universe definite are not outside the universe, looking in. They are inside the universe looking around, participants, collaborators, co-creators. The universe creates observers through billions of years of cosmic evolution. The observers create the universe through the act of observation. The creation creates the creator. The creator creates the creation. The loop is closed, self-referential, self-creating, self-sustaining. The universe bootstraps itself into existence through the consciousness it produces. Wheeler drew this as a capital U. The most famous diagram in the philosophy of physics, the universe beginning at the Big Bang at the bottom of one arm and evolving through billions of years of cosmic history up the other arm, galaxies, forming stars, igniting planets, coalescing life, emerging consciousness, developing until it produces observers at the top who look back down at the beginning, and by observing it, make it definite. The I at the top of the U looking at the base of the U. The observer creating the observed, the present determining the past, the end creating the beginning. The universe participating in its own creation through the consciousness it generates billions of years after the creation event. This is not science fiction. This is delayed choice, quantum eraser experiments extended to cosmological scale. This is the logic of quantum mechanics applied consistently to the entire universe. This is where the equations lead when you follow them without flinching. If Wheeler is right, then you are not in the universe the way a fish is in water. You are in the universe the way an author is in a story. The story exists because the author writes it. The author exists within the story because the author writes himself into it. The universe exists because consciousness observes it. Consciousness exists within the universe because the universe produces consciousness. The circularity is not paradox. It is the fundamental structure of reality, self-referential, self-creating, self-observing. A universe that creates the minds that create the universe. An Ouroboros, a strange loop, a mystery that is not confused but genuinely mysterious. That remains mysterious no matter how deeply you investigate it. Not because you are not smart enough, because the mystery is built into the structure. Is the structure, the mystery of consciousness, observing itself and finding a universe. And in this framework, God is not outside the universe looking in. God is not the watchmaker who builds the watch and walks away. God is not the first cause who starts the chain and lets it run. God is the consciousness that the universe participates in. God is the ground of the participatory act, the reason the loop works, the reason consciousness exists to observe, and the reason observation creates. God is not separate from quantum mechanics. God is the consciousness within which quantum mechanics operates, the awareness within which the wave function exists, the mind within which the equations are true, the observer who never needs observing, the consciousness that is its own ground, self-existing, self-aware, self-sufficient, the aseity that Wigner's logic required, the ultimate observer that the chain of observers points toward, not a being in the universe, the being of the universe, not consciousness in matter, the consciousness of which matter is a thought. And quantum mechanics in this framework is not godless mechanism, is not impersonal mathematics operating in a void, is God's creative method, God's chosen language, God's way of creating a universe that creates observers that participate in creation. Quantum mechanics is the mathematics of divine self-expression, the equations that describe how consciousness manifests as matter, how the one becomes the many, how the observer becomes the observed, how God becomes the universe without ceasing to be God. Quantum field theory is theology written in the language of mathematics, and theology is quantum field theory written in the language of consciousness. This is Shankara's Brahman described in the language of Wheeler's participatory universe. This is Ibn Arabi's tajalli described in the language of quantum observation. This is Eckhart's ground of being described in the language of quantum field theory. This is Nagarjuna's dependent origination described in the language of quantum entanglement. Every mystic, every tradition, every theology converging in the same place. The place where God and quantum mechanics are not alternatives but aspects, not competing but complementary, not or but and the convergence is not vague, not approximate, not poetic gesture. The mathematical structure of quantum mechanics corresponds to the theological structure of divine creation point by point, property by property, parallel by parallel, 10 correspondences, connected, systematic, architectural. The key fits the lock because they were made for each other. The wave fits the particle because both are light. God fits quantum because both are reality, one truth, two languages, both necessary, neither complete. Both pointing at something that exceeds them both, something that can only be approached but never fully captured, something that lives in the gap between every description and the thing described. In the gap between every equation and the reality, the equation models. In the gap between every prayer and the God the prayer addresses. In the gap where mystery dwells, where wonder lives, where the question persists. And if this is true, then the answer to the question we have been asking for 4 parts is simple, terrifyingly simple, beautifully simple, the kind of simple that is not simplification but distillation, the kind of simple that you arrive at only after passing through immense complexity, the kind of simple that contains everything. God or quantum? Both. Not God existing separately from quantum mechanics the way a programmer exists separately from the code. Not God hiding behind quantum mechanics the way a puppeteer hides behind the puppet. Not God using quantum mechanics the way a craftsman uses a tool. God being quantum mechanics the way an author is the story, the way a dreamer is the dream, the way consciousness is experience. Not separate, not hidden, not using, being. God and quantum mechanics as 2 descriptions of one reality, 2 languages spoken by one truth, 2 faces of one mystery that has been asking itself what it is since the first particle flickered into existence from the first vacuum fluctuation 13.8 billion years ago, and has been refining the question ever since. Through stars and planets and oceans and cells and brains and you, and the bridge between them is you, your consciousness, your awareness, your experience of existing in a universe that should not exist but does, that should not produce consciousness but did, that should not contain meaning but seems to, that should not be fine-tuned but is, that should not look designed but looks designed, that should not confirm the mystics but confirms the mystics, that should not point toward God but points toward God, that should not leave the question open but leaves it open, permanently, beautifully, terrifyingly, open. Because the universe does not give final answers, quantum mechanics teaches this above all else, above superposition, above entanglement, above creation from nothing. The deepest lesson of quantum mechanics is that nature does not deal in certainties. The universe gives probabilities. Superpositions. Complementary descriptions. Possibilities waiting to be actualized. The electron does not have a definite position until measured. The cat is not definitely alive or dead until observed. The photon is not definitely wave or particle until the experiment is chosen. Perhaps God is not definitely real or unreal until the question is asked with the right kind of awareness, until the measurement is made with the right instrument. And the instrument might not be a particle accelerator or a telescope or a mathematical proof. The instrument might be consciousness itself, your consciousness, turned inward, turned toward the question, asking not with equations or scripture but with the bare fact of your existence. With the raw wonder of being aware in a universe that should not contain awareness. The universe says, here are the possibilities, here are the parallels, here are the differences, here is the evidence for God, here is the evidence against God, here is the gap between them. You observe, and the possibilities become actual. You choose what to see, and what you see becomes real. Not in the sense that you create God by believing, in the sense that the universe offers you God or quantum and waits for your observation, waits for your measurement, waits for you to collapse the wave function of the deepest question into a definite answer, an answer that shapes how you live, how you love, how you die, how you face the darkness, how you hold the light. The answer you choose creates the reality you inhabit. Choose God and the universe is meaningful, and your suffering has purpose, and your love connects to something infinite. Choose quantum and the universe is mechanical, and your suffering is physics, and your love is chemistry, and meaning is what you build from the void. Choose both, and the universe is mysterious, irreducibly mysterious, permanently mysterious, gloriously mysterious. And the mystery is not the absence of an answer. The mystery is the presence of a question so vast that it contains all answers and exceeds them all. I do not know which answer is correct. No one does. No one can. Not the physicist with the most powerful accelerator. Not the theologian with the most profound scripture. Not the mystic with the deepest meditation. Not the philosopher with the most rigorous logic. Not the Nobel laureate. Not the saint. Not the genius. No one has the final answer to God or quantum. And perhaps that is the answer. Perhaps the permanent mystery is not failure of human intelligence, but feature of reality. Perhaps the universe is constructed so that the deepest question can never be finally answered, so that the search never ends, so that the wonder never dies, so that every generation, every culture, every mind that looks up at the stars and asks why, will find enough evidence to believe and enough mystery to doubt, enough physics to calculate and enough theology to pray, enough mechanism to build and enough meaning to hope, enough reason to think and enough beauty to feel, enough science to know and enough ignorance to wonder. Kurt Gödel proved in 1931 that any sufficiently powerful mathematical system contains truths that cannot be proven within the system, truths that are true but unprovable, truths that require you to step outside the system to see. Perhaps the question of God or quantum is such a truth, true but unprovable from within the universe, requiring a perspective that transcends the system, a perspective we do not have and perhaps cannot have while living inside the system. The question of whether the universe is designed might be answerable only from outside the universe, and we are inside, permanently, beautifully, tragically, inside. The universe holds the question open, permanently, and in the space of that open question, everything important happens. Science happens, religion happens, philosophy happens, art happens, love happens, the search for truth happens, the experience of beauty happens, the choice to create meaning in a universe that might or might not have inherent meaning happens. All of it in the gap, all of it in the question, all of it in the space between God and quantum, where neither answer is final and both are necessary. All of it in you, in your consciousness, in your awareness that holds the question open by the very act of asking it. You are not searching for the answer, you are the search. You are not waiting for the resolution, you are the resolution. The resolution that resolves nothing and opens everything. The answer that is a deeper question. The ending that is a new beginning. You are that space. Your consciousness is that gap. You are the place where the question lives, where mechanism meets meaning, where equations meet experience, where the how of physics and the why of theology collide and produce something that neither can fully explain, something that requires both to describe, something that transcends both, something that is reading these words right now and wondering whether to believe, wondering whether to doubt, wondering whether the light behind your eyes is divine spark or quantum fluctuation, wondering whether the love you feel is cosmic truth or chemical accident, wondering whether the meaning you experience is built into reality or projected onto it. And the wondering itself is extraordinary. Think about it. You are a collection of atoms. Atoms that were forged in the cores of dying stars billions of years ago. Atoms that were scattered across space by supernova explosions. Atoms that drifted through interstellar void for millions of years. Atoms that coalesced into a planet. That arranged themselves through chemistry into molecules, into cells, into organs, into a brain, into you. You are stardust that wonders about stars. You are atoms that ask what atoms mean. You are the universe that questions itself. You are quantum fields that became aware of quantum fields. You are the creation that asks whether it was created. This is either the most profound miracle in 13.8 billion years of cosmic history, or the most remarkable accident. And the fact that you cannot determine which is itself the most extraordinary fact about your existence. The wondering is the point. The wondering is what consciousness does, what consciousness is for, what consciousness was perhaps designed to do, or perhaps stumbled into by accident. The universe produces beings who wonder about the universe. That is either the most extraordinary accident or the most elegant design, and you cannot tell which, and perhaps you are not supposed to tell which. Perhaps the not knowing is the gift, the permanent invitation to search, to ask, to investigate, to pray, to calculate, to meditate, to experiment, to wonder, to live in the question rather than the answer, because the question is bigger than any answer. The question is God or quantum, and the question is you. The vacuum creates from nothing. The fields sustain everything. Entanglement connects across space. Consciousness makes reality definite. The equations are elegant beyond explanation. The constants are fine-tuned beyond probability. The mystics knew before the physicists measured. The parallels are precise beyond coincidence. The differences are real beyond dismissal. The question is open beyond resolution. And you are here, aware, conscious, wondering. The one phenomenon that both physics and theology place at the center. The bridge, the gap, the answer that is a question. The question that is an answer. 13.8 billion years of cosmic evolution. Billions of years of stellar nucleosynthesis forging elements in the cores of dying stars. Billions of years of chemistry assembling molecules on cooling planets. Billions of years of biology evolving nervous systems of increasing complexity. All of it converging on this moment, this awareness, this wondering. You, sitting here, having listened to 20,000 words about whether the universe that produced you was designed to produce you. Whether the consciousness experiencing this moment is the purpose of creation or the accident of chemistry, whether the wondering itself is the point or the noise, whether the gap between God and quantum is deficiency or design. 20,000 words, 4 parts, 10 parallels, 4 differences, 4 mystics, a dozen physicists, the most tested theory in history, the oldest theological traditions on earth, all of it converging on a single question that remains open. That will remain open. That was perhaps designed to remain open. Or that remains open by accident. We do not know. We cannot know. And the not knowing is either tragedy or gift, depending on how you observe it, depending on which wave function you collapse, depending on whether you choose the God description or the quantum description or both, depending on you. God or quantum, both or neither, and or. The deepest mystery you will ever encounter is not out there in the equations or the scriptures. It is in here, behind your eyes, in your awareness, in the fact that you exist at all, in the fact that something rather than nothing, in the fact that awareness rather than darkness, in the fact that you who should not exist but do, you who should not be conscious but are, you who should not wonder but wonder, you. The answer the universe gives to the question the universe asks, God or quantum. The answer is you.